So I know that many Unitarian Universalists are not particularly fond of the Easter story. Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, some people protest. But I have a confession to make. Easter is one of my most favorite times to preach. And I will always preach on Easter. On Easter. Why, you might ask? Thank you for asking. Fantastic. All right, because Easter is ripe for exegesis. Now, exegesis is a fancy seminary word that basically means that we take a piece of text, in quotes. Historically, it's a religious piece of text, but it could be a movie, or a poem, or a folk tale, or it could be artwork, or a photo, or a song. It doesn't matter what the text is, but we take it and we dig into it to find the meaning in it. We human beings are meaning makers, after all. Easter is ripe for exegesis because there are so many ways that we could unpack this story. We can dig into it and see how Easter is about spring and renewal. We can dig into it and see what Easter says about coming back from the dead. We can look at how Easter is about having hope in times of despair, or understand it as a story about love and forgiveness. And Easter can also remind us that hard things happen, but that doesn't have to be the end of the story, and in fact, it often isn't. Sarah gave us a bit of the Easter story in her Words for All Ages, but let's refresh a little bit more, and let's pick up the story after Palm Sunday, after the Last Supper, after the betrayal by Jesus, and after Jesus has been convicted and the crowd demands his execution, and after Pontius Pilate washes his hands. At that point, on Good Friday, the soldiers took Jesus and they stripped him and they put a robe on him. They twisted a crown of thorns on his head and mocked him. Then they spat on him, took the robe off, and led Jesus away. A man named Simon carried the cross for Jesus, as Jesus was by this time too weak to carry it himself. And then the soldiers nailed Jesus' hands and feet to the cross, and over his head was written, King of the Jews. In the story, Jesus' mother, his aunt, and Mary Magdalene stood near the cross. They tended to him while he was dying. The sun darkened, the ground rumbled, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. Jesus cried out to God, and then he died. Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in clean linen cloth and laid it in his new tomb, set in a limestone cave. And he rolled a large stone across the door of the tomb and departed. Saturday was a day of mourning. And on Sunday, Mary Magdalene and some other women went to see the tomb, as Sarah said, to anoint Jesus' body. Now, in some versions of the story, the stone in front of the tomb was already rolled away. And in another version, a great earthquake happened and an angel descended from heaven. And they saw the angel roll back the stone from the tomb and sit on it. And the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. And go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him." And the women were so excited and probably very confused, and they ran off. And on the way, lo and behold, they ran into Jesus, brought back to life, their beloved friend. They cried with joy. That evening, Jesus stood in the presence of his disciples and said, "Peace be with you." He spoke to the disciples for some amount of time in the story and then ascended into heaven. Now, for some Christians, the death and resurrection of Jesus, That was his destiny. That was, one might say, his very identity. More important to some people even than what Jesus taught. And it was in the tomb, in the cave, in which Jesus was transformed. Spring is about rebirth, which is a sort of transformation. Eggs became a symbol of life because they embody the idea of rebirth and rejuvenation in the cycle of life, reflected also in their shape with neither beginning nor end. One of the things Easter is about is transformation. And that transformation happened in a tomb, in a cave, not unlike the darkness inside an egg. So many of our transformations happen in darkness. Because that's the thing about transformations. We often enter them not knowing how we are going to come out. We go into them one way and we emerge transformed, changed. And it is in the darkness that the magic happens, where we, in effect, die to an old life and wake up in a new one. If we are lucky, it's a new one filled with hope and possibility, but sometimes it's not. Have you ever experienced the magic of the transforming cave? And no, I am not talking about the D&D module of that name. I know some of you are thinking it. I'm talking about a time when you found the courage to push through and blossom into beauty, where you felt that you were finally able to live your life as you felt like it was meant to be. This could be the transformation we may experience in the birth of a child or in the death of a marriage. It may come from a diagnosis or an epiphany that we have. It can come from a traumatic experience or even a glorious experience. One of the times my life was most deeply transformed was when I answered the call to ministry with a resounding yes. Transformation can come when we finally answer yes to our true selves. When there was a who we were before or who people thought we were, and a who we are after. And so it is fitting that this Easter, this year, falls on Transgender Day of Visibility, observed each year on March 31st. This is a day to raise awareness about transgender people, many of whom have a before and an after. It is a day to celebrate the lives and contributions of trans people while also drawing attention to the poverty, discrimination, and violence that the community continues to face. International Transgender Day of Visibility was created in 2010 by trans advocate Rachel Crandall. Crandall was the head of Transgender Michigan and created this day in response to the overwhelming majority of media stories about transgender people being focused on violence. She hoped to create a day where people could celebrate the lives of transgender people while still acknowledging that due to discrimination, not every trans person can or wants to be visible. One reason some trans folks may not want to be visible is what is happening these days in our broader society. In Indiana, in 2023, 17 anti-trans bills were introduced. 3 of them passed. This year, 4 have been introduced. Now, all of the media attention over the last few years leads many people to believe that this new phenomenon of being transgender is a passing fad, that we're giving too much attention to a new group of people who have just popped up. But while the term transgender is only about 50 years old, the concept is ancient. The Human Rights Campaign shares that around the 18th century, the Itelmens of Siberia recognized a third gender called kokchuch to describe individuals who were assigned male at birth but expressed themselves as women. And in South Asia, at least 8 known gender-expansive identities have historically been present in the subcontinent. The most well-being hijra, a Hindi term that dates back to the 19th century, and which refers to third gender people of historical, spiritual, and cultural significance in South Asian society. And in North America, prior to colonization, at least 165 tribal gender traditions existed. Many native cultures accepted and respected individuals encompassing a balance of both the masculine and feminine qualities. And in fact, many were keepers of traditions, tellers of the stories of creation, and healers. Today, the Native American community has broadly adopted the term Two-Spirit to refer to such individuals. But we can go back much, much further. In his book, The Name, Rabbi Mark Samath shares that the Hebrew Bible, when read in its original language, offers a highly elastic view of gender. In Genesis 3:12, Eve is referred to as he. In Genesis 9:21, after the flood, Noah repairs to her tent. Genesis 24:16 refers to Rebekah as a young man, and Genesis 1:27 refers to Adam as them. In Esther 2:7, Mordecai is pictured nursing his niece Esther. And in a similar way, in Isaiah 49:23, the future kings of Israel are prophesied to be nursing kings. Why would the scriptures do this? Rabbi Samath asks. These aren't typos, he says. Instead, in the ancient world, well-expressed gender fluidity was the mark of a civilized person. Such a person was considered more godlike. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, the gods were thought of as gender fluid, and human beings were considered a reflection of the gods. The Israelite ideal of the nursing king may have been based on a real-life person, a woman by the name of Hatshepsut, I know I said that wrong, who after the death of her husband donned a false beard and ascended the throne to become one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. Rabbi Samath goes on to posit that the Israelites took the transgender trope from their surrounding cultures and wove it into their own sacred scripture. In his book, he talks about the 4 Hebrew letter name of God, which scholars refer to as the Tetragrammaton, YHWH. He says it was probably not pronounced Jehovah or Yahweh, but instead was the hidden name of God was Hebrew for he, she. Counter to everything we grew up believing, Rabbi Samath says, the God of Israel, the God of the 3 monotheistic Abrahamic religions to which fully half the people on the planet today belong, was understood by its earliest worshipers to be a dual-gendered deity. Sit with that for a minute. Does that change your relationship to God? Transness is not new, and our understanding of it is constantly evolving and changing. To learn more about its history and culture and to gain a deeper understanding of gender in general and how we act it in our own lives, and to grow in your understanding of beloved community, radical welcome, and creating culture shift, I invite you to take the Transgender Inclusion in Congregations courses that are offered at UUI this year. The spring session is now open for registration. You can see your e-blast for details, and there will be summer and fall sessions. Our hope is that more than 50% of the congregation will take this course this year, giving us the critical mass for living more fully into our congregation's values of acceptance, community, and exuberance for life and learning. Because most of us can understand the power of embracing our true selves in all their glory, The power of saying yes to who we are truly, to becoming who it feels like we were meant to be, which sometimes takes a cave. This Easter, we celebrate and honor the transforming cave that most of us have experienced at one time or another, where we go in one way and emerge transformed, changed, where we, in effect, die to an old life and wake up in a new one. If we are lucky, a new one filled with hope and possibility, able to finally live our lives with authenticity. May the majestic love of springtime call us out of our tombs into new ways of being, and may our souls unfurl their wings in glory. Happy Easter. May it be so. May we make it so.